An interesting warm water fly for you today. This is a fly called the Hairy Fodder. This was created by a gentleman by the name of Riendeau in Georgia, and I ran across this. He wrote an article for Fly Tyer magazine back in the spring issue in 2009. I found it very intriguing because the primary premise of this is that you have these little black rings that are secured and tied down to the hook here in the front like this. They allow you to change out these dumbbell eyes. I can pop these out, put another color in or another size in, and I've got, it's a fly that's going to go deeper or shallower or whatever. If you look at it, it's very similar to like a jig and pig. Again, it's a warm water type fly. Not that you couldn't dredge this through some holes and pick up some trout, I think, if you've got the right color combinations, but that's primarily what it was tied for warm water species. The fly itself is pretty straightforward. If you get a chance to find the article in the, like I said, spring 2009 Fly Tyer magazine, he goes in depth about different hooks and different sizes and even using a rattle on it or not using a rattle on it. And he's got a very interesting technique for tying in the rubber rings, a little bit different than I do. And I'm pretty certain you can actually order Hairy Fodders from Rainey's, and I think they have the black rings. You can also order from Rainey's. If not, I will track those down, and there will be a link down in the description below for where you might be able to order those from. But you can also tie this without using that ring, which I'll discuss when I do the video. So that is the Hairy Fodder, a fun little warm water fly. I'll get started. I'm going to start the Hairy Fodder a little bit different. Normally I just put my hook in the vise, but because I have these little black rings here that the dumbbell eyes are going to go through, I've got to thread that onto the hook to begin with. The easiest way that I found to do this is to just take my bodkin and just run it down through. I would just want to go through both sides of that and just run that down through there, coming out the other side like this. And as you can see, I just have that already kind of pre-threaded on there. Now, Riendeau in his article, if you get a chance to read that, has a more elaborate way of attaching these. At least for me, I found it's just as easy to do it this way. The results that I get are just as secure if I do it like this. Then what I'll do is I'll actually thread that ring onto the hook and then bring it right up to the base of that bend. Now the hook on the Hairy Fodder is a Eagle Claw 410. If you're wanting to do the freshwater version, this is a size 4. It is a 60-degree jig hook. However, this is just the one that he used in the article originally when I first saw it, so I'm going with it. However, I have seen people who have tied this on a 90-degree jig hook as well as a straight eye hook. As I mentioned before, you don't have to use these rings to tie this fly and or fish it. Some people will tie it on, say, a Tiemco 8089 or a Gamakatsu B10S without the little ring on it. Once that's in place, I'm going to attach my thread, and for this I'm just using a UTC 140 Denier in black. The only difficult part right here is just pulling up on this and getting this wrapped in around the base a little. Once you get that started, slide that down just a little bit. You want it just almost right at that bend right there on the hook. Then you're going to want to come back the other way. And either way, whether you do it the way that Craig does it in the article or this way, you end up with this nub of the black ring material on the other side. You have to have it in order to have this secured in place. Now, I added a little bit of a change into how this is tied, cover that up, and I'll show you when we get to it. So once that's secured with some figure eights around it, we'll advance our thread down the end of the shank. Now, I normally wouldn't do this at this stage because the big advantage to this fly is this ring right here allows you to change out different size dumbbell eyes. These are a medium dumbbell eye. You could put a small in there, a medium, or a large. These rings will stretch unbelievably for their size. But just for the sake of the tying video, I'm going to go ahead and pop one in here so that you can see the progression of the fly with those eyes in there. And this next step is optional. If you want, you can put a rattle on the back here. This is a size 4 hook, and in his instructions in his original article, he does not put a rattle on the size 4 hook. And I think the primary reason, I'm just going to attach one temporarily here, is that if you look at it, it's just a little too big. It really kind of, the rabbit doesn't go on quite as smooth and easy because of the size of the rattle compared to the size of the hook. It's up to you. I just wanted to point that out. It's kind of optional. You might find a different rattle that you like that works, but I'm going to forego the rattle for now. The next step is to tie in some flash. I'm going for a kind of a crawdad combination here. So I'm using some Flashabou. This is a copper holographic Flashabou. I'm not putting in a ton of flash on this, but since this is typically tied as a bass fly, it's really up to you. If you want, you could put a lot more flash in this. It just, it depends on what you like and your fishing conditions. I'm going to leave those long for just a moment because I'm going to tie in my legs, and actually that and the legs I may trim right at the very end. For legs, I'm using a pumpkin. This is a black flaked pumpkin Sili Legs with orange tips. And I'm going to tie 3 of them in the back here. I'm going to bring those up about the midpoint of the Sili Legs. And you could use rubber legs on this if you want. One advantage to the Sili Legs is they tend to float. They are lower specific gravity than, or is that a higher specific gravity? Anyway, they're not the same as the surrounding water, so they float. So as you're fishing this, if it stops, they'll tend to kind of float up a little bit and add a little bit of life. I'm going to lash that down real well, smooth this off just a little bit. I'm going to tie in my first rabbit. The first rabbit for this one is going to be an orange, and this is an orange crosscut. And this is important because a zonker, what they call a regular zonker, is different from a crosscut zonker. And in that a crosscut, the hairs off of the hide are perpendicular to the hide, whereas on a zonker, they're parallel. They run right down along the hide in the same direction. We want this to be crosscut so that when we wrap this in, all the hair points in a rearward direction real easy. In order to achieve this, you're going to want to tie this in with the hide facing you and the strip going to your left or to the back of the fly and the hair sticking straight up. The reason for this is when we tie this in right here, we get this nice and secure. We're going to put in one wrap here and then put in some more legs. But when I do it this way with the hide facing me going off the back and the hair sticking straight up, when I bring it around to wrap it, notice that the hair turns and it is now facing right rearward off of the back of the hook. Actually, this hide's a little thin, so I'm going to put in 2 wraps of that. And then I'm going to secure that down to the hook shank. Some of this, it varies. If you have a fuller crosscut, meaning there's more hair along that leather than either normal or other strips that you have, then maybe one wrap right in there would do just fine. Now I'm going to put on some more rubber legs. I've got, this time I'm going to choose 4 rubber legs. I'm going to actually clip these in half. I don't want them quite as long. I'm going to tie these in on the sides, but I don't want these as long as the other rubber legs. I want them a little bit shorter. That's why I'm not using the full length of them. And I want to make certain that these are on the sides, if not even towards the top of it. Understand, in the water, this is going to swim like this because of the dumbbell eyes. So this is going to be the top of your fly. I want these rubber legs either to be on the side or on the top right in here so that they will tend to come out of the back as opposed to from underneath. I'll take my other ones, same thing, on the other side, more or less same length. Now, how you proceed here really kind of depends on what you want to do. In the original recipe, you could put some Flash-Brite in here. You could accomplish that with a number of different things, some Flashabou or crystal flash, or even, say, a polymer chenille or something like that. I like to go forward another wrap and then put some flash in. So I'm going to bring that hide straight over. I want to cover up those thread wraps and those legs that I just tied in. Now I'm going to move forward here, probably about 3 wraps, maybe even 4, because that's where I'm going to tie in the brown. And for this particular fly, I'm going to tie in just a little bit of flash between the orange and the brown rabbit. Again, you can do this in some different ways. Experiment with this. Find out what you like, what works for you. Smoothing some of this off here. I'm going to take some, this is some Spirit River Lite-Brite. I don't know that you can even get this anymore, but this is a Black Hills Gold color. And it's just a very wispy kind of flash. I'm going to place this right on top here, securing that down, wrapping back a little bit, and then folding this back over. It's just going to give me some flash underneath that brown rabbit that I'm going to tie on. But I'm going to cut these so that they're just a little bit longer than the orange. That way that flash will just stick out from underneath the rabbit and underneath the brown and along that orange, and just adds a little bit, not even like an overt flash, it's just very subtle. So for the brown, I'm using this is a cross-cut rabbit strip in a crawfish orange. The hide on this is a little bit thicker. See if I can find one that's a little more cross-cut. See, this one here is, and sometimes it's just the way the hair grows on this. Even though they say this is cross-cut, it may have been cut on the hide cross-cut, but as you can see, all that hair is more of a traditional zonker. It's just going straight down along the same direction as the actual hide. Now that could have gotten mixed up in the package. And again, if you've ever cut up your own hides, you know that the hair just sometimes just kind of goes wherever it wants to go. So this one is more your traditional crosscut in that the hide and the hair is 90 degrees to the hide. I'm going to tie this in the same way. And this one we're only going to get about two wraps in. This is kind of an accent color. Popular colors for this fly are, say, instead of the orange, you've got a white, and instead of this brown, you've got a chartreuse, or you may have, instead of the orange, a black, and you may have a purple, or even chartreuse right up front, like this, instead of the brown. So you're only going to get a couple of wraps of the top color, just because there isn't really any more room. If you want to get more in there and have it a little bit thicker, you could find instead of a 60-degree jig hook or 90-degree jig hook, just tie this on a straight hook, say an R75, something that's a 4 or 5x long streamer hook, going to give you a little bit more room. At this point, I'm going to turn the fly over and I'm just anchoring down that hide and everything right up around those eyes. Before I put the finishing touches, I'm going to go ahead and trim the flash and legs here. I want to try and trim those in some different lengths. These legs are the Sili Legs on the side that I put in, and I'm just going to split those up. I left those together just because it makes tying the overall fly easier without having all of these legs flopping all over the place. I am going to throw some head cement down here, and you can do this multiple times when tying this fly if you just want to help secure it a little bit. Normally, this would be the end of the Hairy Fodder, but I started a few years back actually taking some ice dub. I've got some rusty brown ice dub. I started putting some ice dub just around underneath the dumbbell eyes and, over the black ring that's tied in and everything, just to clean it up a little bit, just to make it look a little better. I don't think the fish, I don't think it really is going to, make a huge difference in that regard. I just think that it looks a little bit better. It kind of just finishes it off just a little bit. I'll come right up behind the eye of the hook there. And I'll put in the bobbin squeaking 4 or 5 turn whip finish right behind the eye of the hook. Put some half hitches in if you're more comfortable with those. And again, some head cement. Now the eyes on these will kind of turn and twist a little bit, I found. As you can see, these are kind of, they're straight right here, but if you bump them a little bit, they go this way, they go that way. I'm going to spread that eye stub out just a little bit. Also, as I mentioned, you don't have to use this ring. The ring is simply there to allow you the flexibility to change the color and or the size of the dumbbell eyes for your fishing conditions. If I'm tying these on without, if I'm creating this fly without the black ring on there, then what I'm going to do is take the eye stub and do some crisscross wraps to cover up everything in between and just make it look a little bit more complete. You can't really do crisscross wraps across the black ring simply because if you change this out, you're going to pull all that eye stub off of it and it's just going to start being a mess. So you just kind of have to leave that the way it is. But that is the completed Hairy Fodder. Again, this came out in spring 2009. If you can get a hold of the original article, it's very interesting. There's some interesting tying techniques that he does in it. Mostly, he is a warm water Georgia fly fisherman. So a lot of this is all largemouth bass and smallmouth bass. And so, it kind of fits that fishing condition. But it's a fun fly, even if you don't use the rings to interchange. If you're not that technical of a fisherman, then maybe you tie a few of these with different colors and different sizes, so you can just tie a different one on as opposed to changing out the dumbbell eyes. But I found it very intriguing when it came out, and it has been a very productive fly over the years and a fun fly to tie. So that is the Hairy Fodder. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.